Hi, and welcome to the Pineapple Support Virtual Retreat stage at Webmaster Access. Thank you very much for joining us again. Next, we have Warren.
Hello.
Who is here with me at the Pineapple Support HQ. And I'm going to hand it over to him now to take the lead.
Thank you very much, Ash. And relax. Hello, everybody. How are we? So first of all, I'm Warren. I'm originally from London, but I now live just across the road from Leah, which is very lucky, isn't it? There we go. And I'm going to give you a little chat today on self-worth and self-love. I'll start off with an intro, and then I'll go into my main talk. But before I go into the main talk, I'll do a little talk as to why the main talk that I'm doing is not needed and ultimately totally unnecessary. Unusual, but roll with me on this, please. A bit of background, I was trained as an architect, so my original career was making buildings look pretty. I'm quite good at that. Making them look pretty is easy. I'm not a psychologist. I must tell you this, and all the views that I'm expressing here are purely anecdotal from my experience of working with survivors of PTSD, whether they are service men, women, people struggling with addiction, or survivors of abuse. 8 years ago, I was poisoned out here in Ibiza. It was my big party days, and it was New Year's Eve, and I was sold an ecstasy tablet that was laced with strychnine, which, if you don't know, is rat poison. I won't go into the details of the crossfire I got caught up in, but I will tell you that 5 were dead, and I'm still alive. Thank the Lord. Now, contrary to popular belief, strychnine poisoning is not a bundle of laughs. It slowly creeps up on you and can kill you in a couple of hours. And it hurts. It hurts like hell. I still to this day have nightmare flashbacks about the pain in my back. It was like being electrocuted, and it seemed to go on for days in my disillusioned state. I ended up in the ER room. They started my heart twice, but hey, as I said, I'm here. After that night, there was a plethora of bizarre medical conditions, and I was in London seeing specialist after specialist. I was given a cocktail of drugs to keep me going. I went to see a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine who's a doctor, and I gave him the prescription. And he said, Warren, I know you like irony, but this cocktail of drugs that are going to keep you alive will also kill you in 5 to 10 years. So at this point of desperation, I was looking around for anything. And I heard from somebody that a friend of a friend and their cousin who had a dog, who spoke to their dog, who had a cousin, knew someone that went out to see somebody out in the jungle in the Amazon. I was a bit skeptical, but at that point I was willing to try anything. So I go out to see this guy, and it's a 6-month thing before I get to see him, sorting out, am I good enough for him to see? Will I be able to go out there, etc., etc. The last bit of the journey was 3 days to go and see this dude, Don Castillo. It was 3 days from London, and then when I got there, the last bit was a 3-hour walk through very thick jungle to get to see him. Now, people do romanticize about the Amazon, and believe me, if you want to go, it's a very beautiful place and it's epic, but it's boiling hot and it's wet and it's more humid than a sauna, and everything out there, from the bugs to the fish to the wildlife to the bacteria, can kill you, and they will try. So as I said, I was romanticizing on that last leg, walking up there 3 hours, thinking what was going to happen, wondering about my great new experience that I was going to have. Then suddenly there was a small clearing, and I saw some huts, and I walked over, and then I heard this buzzing in my ear, and I was like, no, it can't be. And I got closer to where the noise was coming from. I thought, no, it can't. It must be some weird shamanic trick. Because in my head, all I could hear was the theme music to Benny Hill, which I hope you know. And I saw this small door, and I could hear this sound, and I walked over to it, and there was this guy sitting there, and he was leaning back, a really big fat guy on this wooden chair, big, not strong enough to support him. And he had this small TV in the corner, a little black and white TV, and there was no picture at all because he had no reception. But the sound was playing the Benny Hill theme tune. And he had this big Liverpool FC soccer shirt on. And then it went down to there, and then he had this big bare belly, and it went down to his pants, which were about the same age as me, but not holding up as well. And he was having a cigar in one hand, and he had whiskey out of a bottle of another. And so I went over to him and I said, "Where is Don Castillo?" And he just ignored me. And so I said once again, "Donde está Don Castillo?" Because it's a very British thing when a foreign person doesn't understand you to just say it again, louder and slower. I think it's from when we had an empire, we've just carried it on. It was then that he just turned around, raised his hand and nodded to say that it was him. It was then that my world collapsed, just as my anger exploded. I was like, what the hell? I put my whole life on hold, travelled for days, eating rubbish to see a fat bloke in a bad soccer t-shirt with whiskey and cigars who's too ignorant to even get up and say hello to me. My ego was crushed. Where was the village parade for me? Where were the laughing children? Where was this mystical wise man in big feather headdress, face paint, and animal skulls around him? I've seen Indiana Jones. I know how the jungle works. I looked at him in disgust, a fraudster in cheap, ill-fitting nylon, and looked down, and he looked at me, and I was dressed in my pathetic tourist, I want to be a local traditional wear, and believe me, I looked a complete twat. It was this point I totally lost it. I was screaming at him, and it nearly ended up in a fight. It was the first time Don Castillo smiled, and he said, "You're not leaving, it's late, and the rainforest is nowhere to go for a gringo to go at night. You should leave in the morning." At that point, I just crumbled on the floor and cried. The fraudster went back to his telly. I was defeated. I lay awake all night, thinking about the shame of returning home and telling everyone I was going home, not after 4 months, but after 4 days. A massive failure to add to a constant list of failures that was getting longer as I was getting older. Another milestone around my neck. I opened my journal, and the last thing I wrote was a Buddha quote saying, "Life is suffering." I was like, no shit, Buddha. And so I scrubbed it out and I wrote, "Life is suffering and sweaty in the jungle." It was at that point that I had what they called Satori in Japan, and it's a flash of enlightenment. And it was another Buddhist quote, and it said, "Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at somebody else, but you are the one that gets burned." This made me realize the raw situation was I was actually in the Amazon, a place I've always dreamed of going to. Not only that, but life had led me to a far corner where not many Western people had gone. And the bloke I came to see, he liked Benny Hill, he liked football, he liked to drink. We could be related. Was he even Irish? But then it hit me, and I burst out laughing, because life to me has always been quite amusing. I've always said that my guardian angel was Oliver Hardy. But the wisdom was I was in a beautiful place, I was safe, I was having an adventure with amazing, amusing characters. The only suffering brought to the situation was by me, trying to force my bizarre Walt Disney production version of what I thought the situation should have been, instead of allowing life to unfold in all of its glory. This is relevant to self-love. As my enforcement of an idea that didn't really matter, me digging my feet in to defend a point, the only person that it was hurting was me. All the things I was defending, demanding happen, were external factors, so I could egotistically relay grand stories when I got back home. The real story that happened to me was much more unique, funny, awkward, stumbling, charming, and authentic than those typical stories you hear. Ultimately, loving who you are involves telling and being in love with your own unique, funny, awkward, stumbling story. That is the beautiful you, that raw, unadorned you. Raw, unapologetic people are like raw food. They are much healthier for human consumption. Now, I'm sure everyone likes a happy ending. And it was. And I ended up spending 4 months with Castillo, a beautiful man who, although unfortunately is not with us anymore, is always here on my shoulder, telling me what to do. In the 8 years since that time, I've trained in Ecuador, Peru, and Mexico. And I use a cactus called San Pedro, in part of helping me deal with clients and help survivors of PTSD. I've also done retreats in USA, Sweden, Mexico, Peru, and Ecuador. I've also worked with a very well-known drug rehabilitation center dealing with users of crystal meth, cocaine, and heroin with quite good results. Currently, San Pedro, unfortunately, is illegal in the USA, but I do believe that in the upcoming years, like marijuana, it will be legalized for medical use. Because San Pedro is part of what I do, people wrongly refer to me as a shaman, and I'm definitely not that. It's a term I'm not comfortable with, that I've actually come to dislike and mistrust. It's got twisted with ego when it should be surrounded in humility. The San Pedro journey is not for all, but in my 5 years of working with it, constant themes do come up. Self-worth is such a common theme, again and again, but I can't stress enough, self-love is always the best healer of all. Excuse me. So before I talk about self-worth and healing the core of unworthiness, which seems to be a disease of epic proportions here in the Western world, I'm going to tell you why my talk is non-essential and why ultimately it's not needed. Because everyone here watching this today are winners. Philosophers over the ages have always asked, why are we here? Now to me, I say we are all here due to ejaculation. Very simple. The only reason I'm talking to you and you're listening to me is some time ago, somebody spunked up and released 200 million sperm and you won. Think about it. No, think about it. Comprehend the enormity of that. Enough sperm to impregnate all of America, all of the UK, and still have some left for Romania. Think of the odds. It's the same probability of being in the UK and winning the lottery 5 times. Imagine entering a marathon. You've got 200 million entrants, and in the last quarter of a mile, you casually cruise past the Kenyan dude and hit the tape first. You've won the biggest race and test you will ever face. Ultimately, in life, there is nothing else to do. If you wanted to put your feet up, light a cigar, have a nice chilled glass of Pinot Grigio, and do fuck all, I would applaud you now. In fact, I'm going to get everyone now to just applaud themselves. There you go, you've done it. Nobody alive is a mistake. Everybody alive is a winner. Now, we're born perfectly us, but we become imperfectly us. Society tells us that there's something wrong with us, shames us into submission to conform, tells us we have to learn stuff to make us better. This is the outer critic of society that puts us down, but it's the more violent inner critic that keeps us there. Because how can you love you if you are being contorted into somebody you are not? And let me tell you now, you don't need to learn anything. You are perfectly you. A true, authentic life of self-love is actually one of unlearning and not learning. Okay, I'll do the speech bit now, but that takes the pressure off. Just sit back and relax. There are 7 billion people here in this world. 7 billion lush individuals. I think looking at me now, there would be loads of funny, freaky weirdos. And I mean that from a place of love, because they're my favorite kind of people. We are born us. Then we are scolded, schooled, shouted to conform, to be something we're not. And we struggle to love who we are because we can only fool ourselves for so long. Because we know deep down, on one level, we are frauds, liars. And these are traits of people who have historically wounded us. So how could we love us if we behave in the same way? Over the years, sages, mystics, philosophers have pondered what enlightenment is. The actual meaning of enlightenment means to wake up, to be awake, or woke if you're a little bit trendy. But it's also to be authentically you, to stand there, not perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. Perfection is an illusion that we are sold. Perfection is a death of love, and it is a death of intimacy. Enlightenment is a total acceptance of who you are, receiving validation through the experience of life and not seeking validation just through the eyes of others. My personal definition of enlightenment is just to love you for whatever you are. Love you for the wounded, the freaky, the anxious, the introverted, the extroverted, the crazy, the caring, the afraid, the beautiful, the perverted, the warm-hearted, flamboyant nut job that you are. And that, if you can realize that, then you will be enlightened. And I'm not asking you to accept anything I've said. I just want you to experience it. Not every day, because if you were that consistent, you wouldn't be that interesting and you wouldn't be looking at me here now. And I'm not expecting you to just switch it today, because like all growth, it's slow, it's natural, and one that you need to be gentle on you with. And before we move on, I'll give you a little musing about love that someone once told me. Love in the English language is very weird. We have one word to describe love. So I have one word to describe my love of music. I have one word, love, to describe my love of nature. I have one word for love that I use to describe my love for my mother. I use the same word of love to describe my love for my girlfriend. And the same love, and the same word, love, to describe my love for my dog. The same word for my dog and my girlfriend. I mean, that's next level kinky and a bit weird. Because in Sanskrit, which is one of the oldest languages ever, they had over 100 words for love. Each aspect of the beautiful human experience could be eloquently put across and understood. Ancient Persia had over 50 words to describe love. Ancient Greece had over 30. But slowly over time, the importance of love has eroded away. Language does, unfortunately, reflect its society. To underline this, Eskimos have 50 words to describe snow, because if they can't explain the subtlety of the difference between wet snow, deep snow, heavy snow, they die. It's fundamental to their living, so they have so many words. So it's sad that in our language today, we have one word for love, because the importance of love has possibly diminished. So, on to our experience of love. Unconditional love is a popular word. It's also, to me, one of the worst lies that we were ever sold. Our parents probably said, and they may have said they loved us unconditionally at some point when we were young. And I suppose in theory, parental love can be perceived as unconditional. But to them, not to us. Because to them, mostly it's their biggest expression of love that they will feel. But all humans, while perfect, are ultimately imperfect by the human nature. It's not their fault. They raised you their best and to be the best, but it's their version of the best and it's not yours. And also, let's face it, that unconditional love was also loaded with conditions. The feeling of love, which in most of us is there naturally in our human nature, is there, but the delivery of that love is an expression of who we are. And we only learn that mechanical side from our experience and mainly how we are parented. And I think most of us would agree that's not always the best template. So the ultimate form of love, the unconditional love from our parents, can be our first experience of love. And we can experience this as an untruth and as pain. In those early formative years, when our neural networks are at the height of their plasticity, love is untrue or love hurts can hardwire into the soft tissue of our brain, in the same way that the Ice Age carved its way to make the Grand Canyons. This creates a strong established neural pathworks into our adult lives. Taking into account the above, is there any wonder why so many people have relationship issues, as love and trust are the foundation of any relationship? And above, I'll just take a drink. We've just covered the easy bit. Parents just being a bit shit. People with anger issues, being late for school play, infidelity, not picking up when they said they would, being late, not being there, passive abandonment. But that's a pretty walk in the park of parenting. Let me take you by the hand and let's meander down the darker subway of abusive parenting. Where does verbal, physical, or even sexual abuse lead us? Sorry, there's a dog here. Sorry, I'll start again. Where does verbal, physical, or sexual abuse leave us in this game of self-worth? Stay with me. It's love and light in a bit. It's a difficult area, but like so many things, when we collectively bring things into the light and see no personal shame in loss of innocence, only then will we heal and stop the abuse for future generations, because that shadiness can only live in the dark and the murky depths and survive in the secrecy and feed off manipulation. Brought into the pure light of day, it withers and it dies. Therapy and counselling are amazing tools at this point. And as I say, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychotherapist. From my experience, my work usually uncovers issues, then I recommend certain professionals. There is unfortunately a growing trend now of people going away and doing certain plant medicines, looking for a quick fix. I'm sorry, darling, it don't work. You've got to put the work in. It's a day-to-day process. Coping in adulthood. Until somebody gets help, they cope. My hero on surviving complex PTSD is Pete Walker from your very beautiful San Francisco. He wrote an amazing book called The Tao of Fully Feeling. He sums up perfectly the 4 F's of survival, which are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. As humans, we have a natural fight-flight tendency, but children who have experienced trauma have a heightened sense, and this is to ensure survival. Fight, as you know, is a response when somebody responds aggressively to something threatening. Flight response is usually when a person perceives a threat and they flee, or they can go into hyperactivity. Freeze. This can happen with deep trauma when somebody just inevitably gives up that they're going to get hurt. And fawn, when somebody conforms and contorts to somebody else to please them, to stop them getting hurt. Traumatized children will gravitate to one of the 4 F's over time, just to survive. And this will become elaborated, and it will then become so interwoven in their responses, it will then form into self-defense structures. While this can help a child survive trauma, it would lead to a very narrow, limited view on adult life. The walls set up to protect them can imprison them for life. But let's chuck some light in. There's always light. Those thought patterns that determine our behavior, that are created in our beautiful minds, that also gives us total power, should we want to be able to change those thought patterns into what we ultimately want them to be. It's never easy, but it's very possible. As I said at the start, it's more unlearning than learning. I've seen many amazing transformations of people from all different types of perceived issues. With a little effort and a whole mountain of self-love, anything, believe me, is possible. Holding on to your past ultimately will not help you. Ultimately, it will only hurt you. Holding on to resentment and expecting it karmically to resolve itself with another person is the equivalent of drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. With help and self-love and self-compassion, I have seen the most damaged people blossom. Just as I said before, bringing things to light, believe me, you will be amazed at how not on your own you are. Therapy at these times is amazing and it's invaluable, but also never underestimate the power of listening and talking to each other, because that's transformative and it's there every day. Luckily, Pineapple is building a community in your industry where it's safe to share anything. As in the bedroom, and now even in the boardroom, nothing is out of bounds. If you're ever at a convention and you see Leah, hello, go over and give her a hug. Or if you see anyone with a Pineapple logo, run up to them and hug them too. Pineapple has been created for you specifically, so use it. They provide 24/7 online chat support, free and subsidized professional therapy and counseling, webinars, support groups, and a bunch of online resources. So go online and check them out. With the work that Leah and the Pineapple team are doing, you are no longer alone. But please talk, talk, talk. Because while we are all beautifully unique, whenever I talk to a friend and a client and really connect, I also hear me within them and what they say. And they quite rightly say, a problem shared is a problem halved. So then, is a kink shared a kink doubled? Loving you. I was no good at learning at school. So let's unlearn, so you can fall back in love with you. I'm thinking of you all now, and out there looking at me, there'll be beautiful eyes. But those eyes are not you. There's beautiful hair. That's not you. You are not your job. You are not your problems. You are not your children. Believe me, you are something much more vast. If you remember my quote from earlier on my theory on enlightenment, that it is to love you for the wounded, the freaky, anxious, introverted, extroverted, crazy, caring, afraid, beautiful, perverted, warm-hearted, flamboyant person you are. Before you were shaped as a person, as a child, you once lived in a fairy tale world of endless possibilities. You ran in fields with dragons, but life can gradually reduce you to a much lesser version of who you are. with social conditioning, being told girls do not behave that way, do not play up to get attention, children should be seen and not heard, boys don't cry, what the hell are you wearing? Suddenly, the open land of fairy tales in which we run free in castles placed in enchanted forests becomes an uncomfortable motel room for one in the unfulfilling pursuit of comfort and approval from others. Accepting the true you. We learnt at a young age that we gained love from our parents by being good. We gained approval by being a good boy or a good girl. We became little junkies by getting nuggets of love, by doing things that they deemed suitable. And they told us off for acting in ways they didn't approve of. And we soon learned to play that game. But once again, this behaviour just about nourished us as children. It starves us when we become adults. The best people I know in the world are the nonconformists. Art, music, film, our whole culture is derived from the minds of the free-thinking, unconventional, and the weirdos. The freaks are who we want to have fun with. In our safe, restricted, cocooned lives, we live out fantasies of an outlandish, free, exciting life by actors in films, characters in books, delve into our darker side with music, and our delicious deviancy with art. It's time to break free from our need of approval from others. It's time to start being authentically you. Time to stop being a neat, tidy, little edited version of who you are that you misconceive as the acceptable you. What you've got to start thinking of, who doesn't like you in all your amazing unhinged glory, can basically go fuck themselves. Once you start living the authentic you, the true, glorious, naked you, people will be drawn to you. The right people will. Now then, like all things, we look to start with real intention and develop and change slowly. Remember, you won that marathon, that race with 200 million people. You don't need to do diddly squat. Wanting to be more authentically you should be done for you, not to change to seem better in the eyes of another. And it's not meant to be hard work. Remember, you've got nothing to learn. You're merely peeling away what's not you. You're unlearning. And it's not work, it's play. Be playful in your self-study. Be light. Enjoy the process. Notice the actions of when you're talking to people. Now, pick easy things, not big red flags. Start small. Be gentle. Playfully look at the way you react around other people and think, is this really me? Do I love the person doing that? If this behavior doesn't suit you, then like that hot coal that we were talking about, drop it. It's that simple, but it can also be extremely difficult. A little word of warning. You may come across things that are difficult to bring up, bad memories. Please talk. You are never alone. And remember, we're only gently playing here. We are slowly releasing the outer layers of what simply does not serve us anymore. Things such as not always having to say yes. Being able to say no with confidence and without guilt is such an empowering thing. On the subject of guilt, it's a biggie for a lot of us. And being of Irish Catholic descent, I'd have got a PhD in guilt before I got to college. But as always, I love to turn a negative into a positive. How about if we looked on guilt as a gift? Stay with me. I remember a few years back, I split with an ex. It's quite intense, and we'd been going out a few years. A month later, I saw her on that beloved social media with another guy. And when I was drunk, I sent a message that I would rather not have sent. The next morning, I apologized for my choice of words, and I took responsibility for my actions. But then after that, rather than sit in my own guilt forever, I looked at the root of my actions. Inside, I was hurting because I was going insane with feelings of abandonment and jealousy. It was pulling up hurt from way, way back in my past. My root intention was actually one of self-love. I was feeling so awful and in a place of jealous abandonment. I thought, I can't keep on feeling like this. I will actually go fucking insane. My initial motivation was one of love. I worked on this with a friend who was a therapist and became aware of certain triggers for me that were embedded deeply. A similar-ish thing happened a year ago. And while my initial feelings were the same, my actions were very, very different. Guilt is a message. It's a little red flag. And in life, You can always make things work for you. It's about perspective. I would like also to ask you to every day tell yourself a reason why you love you. I would actually prefer for you to write it down. The actual act of writing down and putting pen to paper is a very powerful act. And also you can go back and revisit. Once again, be gentle with you. We've all been tricked in believing that we are linear creatures and we must improve all the time. We go up, 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 up. But we're not. We're like nature. We're cyclical. We are up and down. We go round and round. Some days you will rise, some days you will fall, but there's always tomorrow. And I'm also not asking for Gwyneth Paltrow-esque, love you Gwenny, types of self-appreciation of how you help the dolphins, but try to get a really authentic view on self-love. You could love you for the way your hair looked today. You could love you for the way that you let your friend talk all the way through coffee because she was going through a bad time, even though you had something important to say. There's always tomorrow, you can tell her then. And even if they are a very low point, and you can't think of anything good about you or positive to say, just take it down a notch, just take it down to the bare bones. You know, even if it's the fact that you didn't stab the guy who was an idiot in the grocery store who barged in front of you and was rude in the eye with a pencil. We don't approve of that. But if that's the best thing that you did all day, love yourself for that. But most importantly, remember, relax. You've got nothing to do. We've all already won. Nothing needs to be done. We are here but to play with life, with laughter and joy, and just to see what truly suits us and serves the authentic child and person in us here today. Remember, angels only fly because they take themselves lightly, which will lead us to enlightenment, which is to love you for the wounded, freaky, anxious, introverted, extroverted, crazy, caring, afraid, beautiful, perverted, warm-hearted, flamboyant nutjob that you are. So may you go forward from here with lightness and joy, knowing that we are not survivors of life, but we are winners. May all beings be happy. May all beings be kind. May you be lovingly fierce in uncovering the unique and beautiful you.
Thank you very much, Byrne. If there's anyone here that has any questions, we are now, oh, Deborah loves San Pedro.
Hi, Deborah.
Lindsay, yes, it was, well, Byrne did wrote it previously, specifically for this webinar.
Yes. Yes, it was tailored, it was written for this. So
So yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop them into the virtual chat now. We've got access and a few minutes to answer them. Otherwise, looks like I look at the anticipation. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And if you would like any details for Warren and the work that he does, please do get in touch at contact@pineapple-support.org, and I'll be happy to pass any details on. Thanks very much, everyone. And thank you, Warren.
Thank you. Bye.